"Look, Maggie," called out teacher Sarah Chen, using the wrong name as she always did. "Make sure you check those mirrors properly this time. We can't have the children arriving late because the bus driver doesn't know how to drive." The other teachers laughed as Margaret silently performed her pre-trip inspection. They saw a woman past her prime, hired because the district couldn't find anyone else willing to work for minimum wage. They didn't see the operative who had driven through Baghdad under sniper fire, who had evaded pursuit across Eastern European borders, who had been trained to remain invisible until the moment action was required. Their casual cruelty was about to backfire in ways that would reshape their understanding of strength, sacrifice, and the quiet heroes hidden in plain sight. Margaret Thompson had been driving Bus 47 for Lincoln Elementary for exactly 3 months, 2 weeks and 4 days. At 52, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and discount store uniforms that never quite fit right, she looked like exactly what they expected from someone willing to work for $12 an hour plus minimal benefits. What they didn't expect was someone who spoke 6 languages fluently, could assemble an explosive device from household items, and had spent 20 years extracting high-value assets from hostile territories across 4 continents. "Margaret!" Principal Harrison called from the school's front steps, his voice carrying that particular tone reserved for people he considered beneath his notice. "The Mackenzie boy's mother called again about you being too rough with the bus door. These children come from good families. They deserve gentle treatment." Margaret nodded politely, the same way she'd nodded at briefings in Langley when mission parameters required her to endure calculated humiliation. "I'll be more careful, sir." What Principal Harrison didn't know was that Margaret's placement at Lincoln Elementary wasn't random. 3 months ago, intelligence had surfaced about a credible threat against Senator Mackenzie's 8-year-old daughter, Emma, the same Emma who sat in seat 12A every morning, chattering about her weekend plans to classmates who barely listened. The Department of Homeland Security had needed someone invisible, someone who could blend into the background while maintaining constant surveillance, someone whose cover was so perfect that even her targets would dismiss her as harmless. Margaret Thompson, former CIA operative with commendations from 3 directors, had volunteered for bus driver duty. "Mrs. Thompson," came another voice, this one belonging to 3rd-grade teacher Rebecca Walsh. "Could you please not park so close to the teacher parking area? Some of us have actual cars that matter." Margaret adjusted her mirrors one final time and started the engine. Through 20 years of deep cover operations, she'd learned that the most dangerous enemies were often those who underestimated you. These teachers had no idea they were practicing on a professional. The morning routine at Lincoln Elementary had become a carefully choreographed dance of dismissal and condescension. Margaret arrived at 6:45 a.m. sharp, performed her vehicle inspection with military precision, and endured the daily stream of comments from staff who seemed to take pleasure in reminding her of her place in their hierarchy. "Oh, good, the bus is here," announced gym teacher Mike Rodriguez to his colleague as they walked past Margaret's open door. "I was worried Grandma might have gotten lost again." Margaret continued her safety checklist, marking items on her clipboard with the same methodical attention she'd once used to document weapons caches in Syrian safe houses. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was being mocked by people who couldn't navigate a parking lot without GPS, while she had once guided extraction teams through unmarked territories using only star positions and instinct. The children began boarding at 7:15. A parade of small faces carrying backpacks that cost more than Margaret's monthly salary. Most barely acknowledged her existence, which was exactly how she preferred it. Invisibility was a skill she'd perfected over 2 decades of operations. 8-year-old Emma Mackenzie climbed the steps with characteristic enthusiasm, her blonde pigtails bouncing as she clutched a stuffed rabbit. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. I like your sweater today." "Thank you, Emma," Margaret replied, her trained eyes automatically scanning the street for the black sedan that had been conducting surveillance for the past week. "Remember to sit in your assigned seat, please." What the teachers didn't realize was that Margaret's assigned seating chart wasn't about discipline. It was a tactical arrangement that placed high-value targets in optimal protection positions while maintaining clear sightlines to all entry points. "Thompson!" Principal Harrison's voice cut across the loading area like a whip crack. "The Henderson boy's father called. He says you were inappropriate yesterday when you asked about pickup procedures. Stay in your lane. You drive the bus. Nothing more." Margaret's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. In Mozambique, she'd once spent 6 hours negotiating the release of hostages while maintaining perfect composure. A small-town principal's power trip was child's play by comparison. "Understood, sir," she replied, her voice betraying nothing of the tactical assessment she was constantly running. Henderson's father worked for a defense contractor with access to classified information. His unusual pickup schedule had triggered alerts that Margaret was required to investigate. As the last child boarded, Margaret caught sight of the black sedan again, this time parked across from the school with 2 occupants who were trying too hard to look casual. Her training kicked in automatically, license plate memorized, driver descriptions cataloged, potential escape routes calculated. "All right, everyone buckled?" she called to her passengers, her voice warm and motherly. None of them suspected that their bus driver was simultaneously running a mental checklist of defensive maneuvers and evacuation protocols. Through her oversized rear-view mirror, Margaret watched Emma Mackenzie settle into seat 12A, completely unaware that her morning ride to school was actually the most secure transportation in the tri-state area. The black sedan followed the bus route again, maintaining exactly the same distance as the previous 4 days. Margaret's eyes flicked between the road and her mirrors with the practiced rhythm of someone who had spent years identifying potential threats while maintaining operational cover. In the staff break room later that morning, she overheard the conversation she'd been dreading. "Did you see the news about Senator Mackenzie?" whispered librarian Janet Foster. "Something about increased security at his Washington office. They're saying there might be credible threats." Margaret continued filling her coffee cup, her expression carefully neutral while her mind processed the intelligence implications. If the threat had escalated to the point of public acknowledgement, the timeline was accelerating faster than headquarters had anticipated. "Well, at least his daughter is safe here," replied Sarah Chen, stirring sugar into her tea. "It's not like anyone would target a random elementary school." Margaret's training screamed warnings. Random elementary schools were exactly the kind of soft targets that professional operatives used to apply pressure, the casual dismissal of security concerns by people responsible for children's safety made her jaw clench with barely controlled frustration. "Excuse me," interrupted Principal Harrison, appearing in the doorway with his usual air of irritated authority. "Thompson, you left your bus unlocked during lunch duty yesterday. We can't have unauthorized personnel accessing school vehicles." The accusation was false. Margaret's bus was secured with electronic locks that she monitored continuously, but arguing would only draw unwanted attention to her operational protocols. "My apologies, sir. It won't happen again." What Harrison didn't know was that Margaret's lunch duties involved conducting systematic security sweeps of the school perimeter, checking for surveillance equipment and maintaining communication with her handler through encrypted text messages disguised as grocery lists. Her phone buzzed quietly, a message from her sister about picking up milk and bread. Operational code that meant threat assessment elevated, maintain heightened readiness. Margaret deleted the message and returned to her coffee, outwardly calm while internally shifting to the higher state of alertness that had kept her alive through 20 years of fieldwork. "You know," said gym teacher Rodriguez, addressing the room in general, "I still don't understand why they hired her. She's got to be the oldest bus driver in the district." "Probably couldn't find anyone else willing to work for what they pay," Chen replied with a laugh. "Not exactly a job that attracts top talent." Margaret sipped her coffee and listened to them discuss her limitations with the same detached professional interest she'd once used to monitor enemy communications. Every casual insult was filed away, not from wounded pride, but from operational necessity. Understanding how others perceived her was crucial to maintaining effective cover. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a legitimate text from Emma Mackenzie's mother about a dentist appointment pickup, but embedded in the message was a code phrase that made Margaret's blood run cold. "Early dismissal requested." In their operational language, early dismissal meant imminent threat. Something was happening, and it was happening today. Margaret finished her coffee with the same unhurried pace she'd maintained for 3 months, gathered her things, and walked back to her bus. To anyone watching, she looked like exactly what she appeared to be, a middle-aged woman in a custodial position, invisible and unremarkable. She had no idea that in less than 2 hours, that invisibility would become the most important weapon in her arsenal. At 1:47 p.m., Margaret was conducting her afternoon vehicle inspection when she noticed the third surveillance team. Unlike the obvious black sedan, these operatives were professionals. A utility van parked at the far end of the street, 2 men in work uniforms who moved with military precision. Her trained eyes catalogued every detail: the van's modified antenna array, the way both men kept their right hands free, the tactical boots beneath their civilian coveralls. This wasn't reconnaissance anymore. This was pre-operational positioning. Margaret's phone vibrated with an incoming call from Emma's mom. She answered with her usual cheerful bus driver voice. "Hello, Mrs. Mackenzie. How can I help you?" The voice on the other end was clipped, professional, definitely not Emma's mother. "Thompson, this is Control. We have confirmation of an active threat. 3 vehicles, minimum 6 hostiles, approaching your location. Estimated arrival 14 minutes. Margaret continued her external inspection, checking tire pressure while processing tactical information. To any observer, she looked exactly like a conscientious bus driver performing routine maintenance. "I understand," she replied calmly. "Should I adjust pickup procedures?" "Negative. Maintain cover at all costs. Local authorities are compromised. You are the only asset in position." Margaret felt the familiar rush of operational adrenaline, controlled and channeled after years of field experience. She ended the call and walked back toward the school, her mind automatically shifting into tactical mode. Inside the building, afternoon classes continued their normal rhythm. Teachers graded papers, children worked on math problems, and Principal Harrison sat in his office completely unaware that his school was about to become the center of a federal incident. Margaret entered through the main office, nodding politely to the secretary. "Just checking on early dismissal procedures," she said, her voice maintaining its usual deferential tone. The secretary barely looked up. "Nothing scheduled today." But Margaret's trained eyes had already identified what she needed: the school's PA system, the lockdown protocols posted behind the principal's desk, and, most importantly, the emergency communication panel that connected directly to local law enforcement. She had 13 minutes to position herself strategically without alerting anyone to the approaching danger. 13 minutes to become the invisible guardian that 30 children would need when their world exploded into chaos. Moving through the hallways with practiced casualness, Margaret mentally mapped exit routes, identified defensive positions, and calculated response times. Her custodial uniform and unremarkable appearance made her functionally invisible to the teachers and staff she passed. In classroom 12B, Emma Mackenzie was working on a geography project, completely absorbed in coloring the outline of Colorado. She had no idea that outside, 3 vehicles carrying armed professionals were approaching with orders to extract her by any means necessary. Margaret's phone buzzed with a final message. Package secured or eliminated. No witnesses. The message was intercepted communication from the incoming team. They weren't planning a kidnapping. They were planning a massacre designed to look like a random school shooting, with Emma's death buried among the other casualties. Margaret deleted the message and made her decision. Her cover was about to be blown, her quiet retirement from fieldwork was about to end, and 30 innocent children were about to discover that sometimes guardian angels wear bus driver uniforms and carry 20 years of classified training. She had 11 minutes to save them all. Margaret moved through the school with purposeful calm, her custodial keys providing access to areas that would be crucial in the coming minutes. In the maintenance closet, she retrieved the emergency communication device she'd hidden behind a water heater 3 months ago, standard protocol for deep cover operations. The device crackled to life with encrypted chatter. Perimeter secure. Target confirmed in Building A. Execute on my mark. 8 minutes. Margaret pocketed the device and walked toward the main office where Principal Harrison was reviewing budget reports with his usual expression of bureaucratic irritation. She knocked softly on his doorframe. "Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry to bother you, but I think we might have a problem with some suspicious vehicles outside." Harrison barely looked up from his paperwork. "Thompson, part of your job description is driving the bus, not playing security guard. If you're concerned about something, call the district office." Margaret's jaw tightened. In 8 minutes, this man's dismissive attitude was going to get children killed unless she acted. "Sir, I really think you should look—" "I think," Harrison interrupted, standing up with exaggerated patience, "you should focus on your actual responsibilities and stop trying to create drama where none exists." 6 minutes. Margaret made a decision that would end her cover, but potentially save 30 lives. She stepped into Harrison's office and closed the door behind her, her entire demeanor shifting from submissive bus driver to command operative. "Mr. Harrison, my name is Margaret Thompson, CIA Operations Division, retired. In approximately 6 minutes, this school is going to be attacked by armed professionals targeting Senator Mackenzie's daughter. You have 30 seconds to decide whether you want to save these children or argue about my qualifications." Harrison's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The transformation in Margaret's presence was so complete, so professionally authoritative, that his bureaucratic bluster evaporated instantly. That's impossible. You're just—" "A bus driver, yes. An excellent cover for a protection detail." Margaret moved to his window and identified the positioning of the assault team. "They're professionals, which means they've planned for local police response times. We're on our own until federal backup arrives." Margaret's phone buzzed with another intercepted communication. "Academic building clear. Initiating phase 1. 4 minutes." "What do you need me to do?" Harrison whispered, finally grasping the reality of the situation. Lockdown protocol, now. But don't use the standard announcement. That will tell them we're aware. Make it seem routine. Margaret was already moving toward the door. Then get on the phone to FBI Counterterrorism Division, extension 4429. Tell them Operation Schoolyard is compromised, and Margaret Thompson is going active. Harrison reached for his desk phone with trembling hands while Margaret stepped back into the hallway. Her 3 months of careful observation were about to pay off. She knew every room, every exit, every potential defensive position. More importantly, she knew these children. Emma Mackenzie in 12B, little Tommy Rodriguez who always forgot his lunch money, Sarah Kim who had trouble with her shoelaces. They weren't mission objectives anymore. They were her responsibility. The lockdown announcement echoed through the building. Attention staff and students, we are implementing a routine safety drill. Please secure your classrooms and remain calm. Margaret heard the confusion in teachers' voices as they tried to remember lockdown procedures they'd never expected to use. She also heard something else, the sound of vehicle doors slamming in the parking lot. 3 minutes. Margaret Thompson, former CIA operative, current bus driver, and about to be guardian angel to 30 terrified children, took a deep breath and prepared to show Lincoln Elementary exactly what 20 years of classified training could accomplish when innocent lives hung in the balance. The quiet war was about to begin. The first gunshot shattered the afternoon calm at exactly 2:03 p.m. Margaret heard it from the main hallway, along with the distinctive sound of reinforced glass being breached. They were entering through the gymnasium, exactly as she'd anticipated. "All units, we have active shooters at Lincoln Elementary," crackled from Principal Harrison's office, where he was frantically coordinating with law enforcement. His voice carried a tremor of panic that Margaret had heard countless times in crisis situations. Margaret moved with fluid precision toward the sound of danger, not away from it. Her 20 years of training had taught her that in situations like this, the first few minutes determined who lived and who died. She heard muffled screams from the direction of the gym, followed by the heavy footsteps of tactical boots moving through the corridors. 3 men, possibly 4, spreading out in a coordinated sweep pattern designed to control key areas before law enforcement could respond. Margaret's earpiece, the one she'd activated from her emergency kit, filled with professional chatter. Building secured, academic wing clear. Locate primary target. Emma Mackenzie. They were hunting an 8-year-old girl whose only crime was being born to a senator who'd voted against their interests. Margaret reached classroom 12B, where Emma's 3rd grade class was huddled in the corner, their teacher, Mrs. Patterson, trying to maintain calm while clearly fighting her own terror. Through the small window in the door, Margaret could see Emma clutching her stuffed rabbit, tears streaming down her face. The footsteps were getting closer. Margaret made the decision that would end her cover forever. She opened the classroom door and stepped inside, her entire presence transforming from invisible bus driver to command authority. "Mrs. Patterson, I need you to listen very carefully," she said, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "I'm going to get these children to safety, but I need you to follow my instructions exactly." You're just the bus driver," Patterson stammered, looking at Margaret as if seeing her for the first time. "No," Margaret replied, checking the hallway one more time. "I'm not." She moved to the classroom supply closet and retrieved items that no one would suspect. A small device that looked like a pencil sharpener but was actually a communication scrambler, and a letter opener that was perfectly balanced for throwing. The sound of doors being kicked in echoed from the hallway. They were conducting room-to-room searches now, and classroom 12B was next on their route. Margaret positioned herself behind the door, her body language shifting into something that would have been recognizable to anyone who'd served in special operations. Mrs. Patterson stared in shock as the woman she'd dismissed as just the help suddenly radiated lethal competence. "Emma," Margaret called softly, "I need you to be very brave for me, sweetheart, just like in the stories about secret agents." Emma looked up with wide eyes, somehow sensing that this wasn't a drill anymore. Heavy footsteps stopped outside the classroom door. The handle turned slowly. Margaret Thompson, former CIA operative, positioned herself to do what she'd been trained for 20 years to do: protect innocent lives by any means necessary. The door opened, and the war for Lincoln Elementary began. The first operative entered classroom 12B with tactical precision, assault rifle raised and eyes scanning for targets. What he didn't expect was the middle-aged bus driver who seemed to materialize behind him like a ghost. Margaret's movement was surgical, a precise strike to his carotid artery that dropped him silently to the floor. His weapon was in her hands before his body hit the ground, and she was already repositioning as his partner appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Patterson, keep the children down and quiet," Margaret commanded, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying absolute authority. The second operative hesitated for a fraction of a second, confused by the sight of an elderly woman in a bus driver's uniform, holding military-grade equipment with obvious expertise. That hesitation cost him everything. Margaret's training kicked in with muscle memory, honed by decades of field operations. She disabled the second man with the same efficient brutality that had made her legendary in classified circles, then quickly secured both weapons. "Emma," she called softly to the terrified 8-year-old, "remember how we practiced fire drills? I need you to help me get everyone to the safe place." Emma nodded through her tears, somehow understanding that Mrs. Thompson wasn't just a bus driver anymore. Margaret's earpiece crackled with increasingly frantic communications from the remaining operatives. "Alpha team not responding. Someone's taken out our entry team." She smiled grimly. They'd planned for police response, civilian panic, even armed security. They hadn't planned for a CIA operative with 20 years of urban warfare experience who knew every inch of their target location. Margaret began moving the children in groups of 5 through a route she'd memorized during her first week on the job: maintenance corridors that connected to the bus loading area where her vehicle waited with modifications that no school district budget had ever paid for. "Stay close to Mrs. Patterson," she instructed the class. "Walk quietly, just like we're playing hide and seek." The children followed with the perfect trust that only 8-year-olds possessed, not fully understanding the danger, but sensing that their bus driver had somehow become their protector. Through her earpiece, Margaret heard the tactical chatter that told her exactly how much trouble the remaining operatives were in. "Sniper down! Entry team eliminated! This was supposed to be a soft target." Margaret guided her group through the maze of corridors with practiced efficiency, but she could hear additional footsteps. Backup operatives who'd been positioned outside were now entering the building. She reached the bus loading area and opened the emergency exits she'd prepared months ago. Her bus wasn't just a school vehicle anymore. It was an armored transport with communication equipment that could coordinate with federal response teams. "Everyone on the bus," she instructed calmly, "just like a regular day." As the children climbed aboard, Emma tugged on Margaret's sleeve. "Mrs. Thompson, are you really a secret agent?" Margaret knelt down to the little girl's eye level, her expression gentle despite the chaos around them. "I'm someone who makes sure little girls like you get home safe to their families." The sound of approaching sirens filled the air as FBI counter-terrorism units finally arrived. Margaret's encrypted communication device confirmed what she already knew. Federal backup was 7 minutes out, and she'd already neutralized the primary threat. Through the bus windows, she could see the remaining operatives surrendering as they realized their mission had been compromised by someone they'd never seen coming. Principal Harrison appeared in the loading area, his face pale with shock as he watched children calmly boarding a bus driven by someone who had just saved their lives. "Thompson!" he called out, his voice shaking. "Who? What are you?" Margaret looked at him through the bus window, her expression returning to the same patient calm she'd maintained for 3 months of his condescension. "I'm exactly who I told you I was, Mr. Harrison. I'm just very good at my job." The FBI debriefing took place in the Lincoln Elementary Gymnasium, now transformed into a federal command center. Agent Sarah Collins, lead investigator for Counterterrorism Division, sat across from Margaret in a folding chair that seemed absurdly ordinary given the circumstances. 23 years of service, Collins read from Margaret's classified file. Operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and locations that remain redacted. Medal of Honor recipient. Why didn't you tell us you were here? Margaret adjusted her bus driver uniform, which now seemed like a costume from another life. I was told to maintain deep cover until absolutely necessary. Today became absolutely necessary. Around them, the same teachers who had mocked her for months stood in clusters, their voices hushed with disbelief. Sarah Chen kept staring at Margaret, as if trying to reconcile the woman who'd saved 30 children with the incompetent driver she'd ridiculed daily. Principal Harrison approached hesitantly, his usual authoritative bluster replaced by something approaching humility. "Agent Thompson, I mean Mrs. Thompson, I owe you an apology." Margaret looked at him with the same patient expression she'd worn through months of his condescension. "You owe me nothing, Mr. Harrison. You were protecting your school the best way you knew how. But I treated you like exactly what I appeared to be," Margaret finished gently. "That was the point." Agent Collins closed the file and leaned forward. "The department wants to offer you reinstatement. Full rank, choice of assignment. What you did here today saved not just these children, but potentially prevented a national security crisis." Margaret's response surprised everyone in the room. "I appreciate the offer, but I think I'll stick with driving the bus." The stunned silence was broken by a small voice from the corner where Emma Mackenzie sat with her parents. "Does this mean Mrs. Thompson won't be our driver anymore?" Margaret walked over and knelt beside the little girl who had unknowingly been the center of an international incident. "Would you like me to keep being your bus driver?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "You're the best bus driver ever, even if you are a secret agent." Margaret smiled, feeling something she hadn't experienced in 20 years of classified operations, the simple satisfaction of being exactly where she belonged. Senator Mackenzie, who had flown in from Washington the moment he'd learned of the threat against his daughter, shook Margaret's hand with genuine emotion. "My family owes you everything. If there's anything—" "There is one thing," Margaret interrupted quietly. "I'd like the district to invest in better security training for staff, and maybe treat their employees with a little more respect, regardless of their job titles." 3 months later, Margaret still drove Bus 47 for Lincoln Elementary. The difference was that now everyone knew exactly who they were looking at when she performed her morning inspection. The teachers who had once mocked her now greeted her with genuine warmth and respect. More importantly, the children felt safe. Emma Mackenzie still sat in seat 12A, still chatted about her weekend plans, still said thank you when Margaret helped with her seatbelt. But now she did it knowing that guardian angels sometimes wore bus driver uniforms and carried 20 years of training to keep little girls safe. Principal Harrison had implemented new security protocols and, more significantly, had instituted mandatory respect training for all staff. The message was clear. You never knew who might be sitting quietly in the corner, watching and waiting to prove that heroes came in all shapes, sizes, and job descriptions. As Margaret drove her afternoon route, watching 30 pairs of young eyes in her rearview mirror, she reflected on the lesson she'd taught Lincoln Elementary. Strength doesn't always announce itself, courage doesn't require recognition, and sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone overlooks. The quiet war was over, and everyone had learned exactly what happened when you underestimated the wrong bus driver. Margaret's story reminds us that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear bus driver uniforms and endure our mockery while secretly protecting us. If you were Margaret, would you have revealed your identity sooner or maintained your cover? Let us know in the comments. If this story inspired you to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their job title, smash that like button and subscribe for daily inspiring stories. Don't forget to share your thoughts below. We read every comment. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.